Hey everyone. This novel starts off super engaging. The heroine is in the king's palace, where the king both pampered and keeps secrets from her. Driven by curiosity, she goes to the library to uncover secrets and encounters the sinister serpent 𝐿𝐤𝐳, who informs her of her alleged extraordinary identity. To make things worse, one of the king's top aides suddenly goes out of control and hurts the heroine, while the other comes to her rescue like a hero. After this series of bizarre events, how will the heroine seek the truth? Follow me to keep up with the updates. Chapter 24. Wake up. My eyes fluttered open, a gas catching in my throat as consciousness rushed back. The opulent bedchamber was bathed in the soft glow of dawn, sunlight streaming through the grand windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. Despite the serene morning light, my head throbbed with a dull ache, as if my mind was rebelling against 𝐿𝐤𝐳. 𝐿𝐤𝐳. Rumbling sound from beside me drew my attention. I turned my head, my gaze falling upon the king's striking visage. He remained in slumber, but his position had shifted during the night. His muscular arm now encircled my waist, his broad chest serving as an unexpectedly comfortable pillow. He trudged to my cheeks as I realized the intimacy of our position. This proximity was unprecedented between us. Never before had we shared such a close, unguarded moment. I hadn't intended to stay the entire night. My plan had been to remain only until he drifted off, then quietly retreat to my own chambers. But exhaustion had claimed me, and I found myself unable to resist the allure of sleep. Now, nestled against him, I couldn't deny the contentment that washed over me. A part of me wished this moment could stretch on indefinitely. Take a walk. The sudden urge to move overwhelmed me. As much as I enjoyed the warmth of the king's embrace, my limbs ached for movement after being pressed against his imposing form all night. With utmost care, I extricated myself from his grasp, my movements slow and deliberate to avoid disturbing his rest. My shoes, simple flats I had discarded the previous evening, waited patiently by the bedside. I slipped them on, relishing the familiar comfort. The idea of a brief stroll to stretch my legs was tempting. Perhaps I could return afterward and... No, I chastised myself. Now that I had left the sanctuary of his arms, it would be improper to slink back into his bed. His invitation had surely been a one-time occurrence, born of unique circumstances. I had made it halfway across the expansive room when a sudden, guttural sound from the king made me freeze. His massive form shifted restlessly before settling once more. For a moment, I entertained the notion of waking him, inviting him to join me on my walk. Don't wake the king. The thought vanished as quickly as it had formed. He needed his rest to fully recover. Disturbing him would be selfish. But where should I go? Perhaps the palace gardens would offer a peaceful refuge in the early morning light. Go to the library. I could use a good book to read, especially when the king would leave for hours on end, and I got bored of losing at chess to 𝐿𝐤𝐳. I knew where the library was. I spent a lot of time there when the king had left for the islands. It was a beautiful room lined with marble statues and tall wooden pillars. It didn't take long to walk to the extravagant room from the king's wing, and I was leafing through a few interesting books before I knew it. This library was the first finished room in the entire castle. I jumped at the familiar voice echoing around the large, empty, circular room, the book I had been glancing at falling heavily from my hands. My eyes wide as I whirled around to glare at the intruder. Liberius shot me a wide, sickening smile, as if the incident from the other day had never happened. As if he hadn't run away terrified of the emptiness behind me. I gripped for a heavy book resting on the shelves, gripped at any kind of weapon to hold between the two of us. Forgive me, my lady. His smile widened, his yellow eyes glowing in the faint light of the torches lit high above our heads. I did not mean to startle you. I highly doubt that. I tried to keep my voice calm and controlled, but it still came out as a startled snap. There is no reason to be wary. Dear, I will not harm you. What are you doing here? I asked instead of answering that obvious lie. He would very much hurt me if it benefited him anyway. Why had I left the king's room in the first place? Left his arms, I wanted nothing more than to be back there, with him, where he said I belonged. I spend much time here when I am not with the king. I have to be well versed in knowledge if I am to remain his advisor. If he doesn't kill you. The bow flashed into my mind as fast as it left, and I was shocked at the dark statement. I had never really been one to wish harm upon anyone, yet I knew the phrase to be true. The king would kill him if he no longer needed him. Then he paused, his yellow eyes glowing in the dim light before he took a step back. I am actually glad you are here. I want to show you something. I don't think so. Oh no, my lady. It is nothing bad. I found an article of history I think you would very much find interesting. Everything inside of me was screaming not to trust him, so I didn't. I gripped tighter onto the book behind me and clenched my jaw. I was going anywhere with him. I'm good. Thanks. Serpent, man's eyes darkened, and a brief flash of red seemed to rise on his pale neck in anger. Wouldn't you like to know a few answers to all those questions you have bubbling around inside your head? To know what the king is trying to keep from you? I was so close to throwing the book at his pale face and running for the library doors, but his words made me pause. He's been around the king for who knew how long. Despite his unfavorable reputation, I'm sure he knew things about him no one else did, and I'm sure he could answer the questions constantly turning in my brain. But was that temptation really enough to make me go with him? I only want to talk. Here in the library, he added when my hesitation didn't seem to fade. I licked my lips nervously and slowly let go of the book behind me. 5 minutes. And then you tell me what I want to know. Yellow eyes flashed in amusement. I will tell you what I can. Trusting him would be a huge mistake. I knew that. But 𝐿𝐲 and Turf refused to tell me anything. And the king made it quite clear it was the time. When would it be then? Liberius was suddenly looking like the only answer to all my questions. I would just keep my distance. Very well. Excellent. Follow me. He turned without another word, his long dark robe swishing behind him before walking back into the main area of the lobby. I slowly followed after him, and made sure to keep at least 4 feet between us. He led me to a small table towards the back of the large library, a couple books and long documents scattered across its surface. The tension in my shoulders slowly eased. It seemed harmless enough. He said you can answer my questions. I started after he walked around the table and started leafing through the large open book on the desk. I can only tell you what I know. I assume he has told you about the origins of his kind. Yes, he told me the story. It is more than just a story. My dear. His pale, yellow eyes glanced up from the book in front of him briefly before down again. My brows furrowed into a frown. A myth. I know. I don't understand how any of this matters. It is more than just a story or myth. I had my doubts too, but those all subsided the day we conversed on the stairwell. Well, I wouldn't say converse. What do you mean? I asked with a frown as he put most of his attention on the book in front of him. Let me start from the beginning, he muttered as his slender pale hands continued to flip pages. It is said that Adranus travels the mountain in endless, tormented journey to find his love. I tried to look into the spirit realm to see if that were true, but even my gifts aren't strong enough to find a god who does not want to be found. What in the world are you talking about? Spiritual gain, my lady, and power. That is what makes the world go round. He stopped leafing through the pages when he found what he was looking for, and pointed at the section with a sickening smile. Come, look at this. I hesitated from the other side of the table. A safe side of the table. The one he was looming over. But I had to admit, I was curious. I noticed the king had been acting differently long before the castle found out about you. He started slowly as I walked around the table just enough to glance down at the picture his pale fingering on in the book. It was a picture of a wolf. A large, dark wolf, howling up to a full moon glowing in an otherwise dark sky. There were no stars in sight. I frowned. Well, that seemed too generic to make a big deal over. Being curious, for North as well, being of course, I looked into the spirits to find the cause of his unrest. The part of 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐿 soul that had been passed down his line was stirring. He was flipping the page now to one filled with incoherent and illegible words. There was another picture also, one of what looked like hundreds of falling stars. His pale finger lingered over one's glowing tail. No king, prior to North, had ever had a mate. Not one. They marry females who would uphold the royal title with dignity. You are the first true mate of any wolf, born king descended from Adranus. Oh my. That was definitely news to me, but I guess it made sense. North had been alive for a long time, and I never bothered asking him about his family or those who came before him. It was a conversation I would have to bring up soon. I knew he gave up on finding his mate, but I didn't know that his entire line had either. It is only logical that the part of 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐿 soul that is inside of the king would be drawn to you. Why? My fear of the creepy man was slowly starting to diminish, and replaced with a deep curiosity. My questions weren't necessarily being answered, but I did find what he was saying fascinating nonetheless. The god of the moon lost his mate a very, very long time ago. It would appear that the line he created would suffer the absence as well, until now. But what female could ever hold enough significance to be the mate of one of 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷's descendants? His yellow eyes flashed, and his smile turned into that of a sick, twisted, excited little boy. It caused some of my previous fear to boil back to the surface. This, Lady Immerse, is your significance. This is you, a reincarnation of 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐿. My eyes lingered over the picture, over his pale finger just barely touching the delicate tail of the fallen light. I frowned. A star? You think I'm a star? This man was more delusional than I thought. I was sure at first. I figured the heavens just decided it was time for the king to have a true mate. But when I saw your power, I knew something was different about you. And when we conversed on the stairwell the other day, my suspicions were confirmed. What are you talking about? This man was crazy. No wonder the king and the others wanted nothing to do with him. I took an uneasy step away from him. I didn't care about answers to my questions as much anymore. I just wanted to get away from him and his insane notions. Adranus is awakening, both inside of the king and in the spirit realm. Your panic during our conversation called to him. His apparition appeared behind you. My heart seemed to stutter in my chest. That was why he seemed so scared that day. Why he ran off. He saw something behind me, someone. Or he thought he saw them at least. This is crazy. You're insane. On the contrary, I'm probably the only one with half a brain in this entire castle. But if you don't believe me, he said on a sneer, his yellow eyes flashing almost a pale green in the light of the library, ask the king about Immerse. My eyes snapped up to his as my heart skipped in my chest. Immerse. That name the king had called for on his deathbed. The one he claimed was his star. I could feel the air slowly seep from my lungs. Immerse. Why, what is so special about that name? His thin lips pulled into a sly smile at the corner, and the irises of his pupils almost seemed to slant as if the serpent he so eagerly portrayed was trying to seep out. It is who you are. Immerse. It is Adranus, star. I took another unsettled step away from him in the table. I could feel a headache begin to form behind my eyes. This was all so surreal. I was sure if I believed him at all. Then again, I would have thought it impossible for the king to have a part of a god's soul until he should me. And I always thought it was impossible for me to have a mate. But he was here in the castle, sleeping the morning away. Why are you telling me this? I asked on a shaky sigh as I lifted my hand to rub across my forehead. I needed to get away from him as soon as possible. I need your help to find him, to find Adranus. You are his star. Your connection to him is far greater than that of the king's. Uneasy butterflies shot through my stomach like a stampede. And the look in his pale eyes didn't help matters at all. My help. What could I possibly do? His fingers tapped against the wood of the table as his other hand closed the large book in front of him, the one labeled in a language far too foreign to me. He will come to you, when you meet him. But why? Why do you want to find him so badly? I doubted it was to help the immortal being find his mate again, to find his star. A star that the insane lunatic thought was me. For his power. My Lady Aunt. I was hoping you would still be by my side when I woke. Immerse. I drew my gaze from the bowl of fruit in front of me to the large wolf, born walking into the dining hall. A small smile pulling at his lips. My stomach flipped uneasily. I wanted to take a walk this morning. My response was automatic. My eyes dropping back down to my breakfast. I would have gone with you. He spoke softly as he sat in the chair at my side, his large body looming over mine. I didn't answer him. My mind was still reeling too much from what Liberius had said. The insane man thought I was the reincarnation of a star. 𝐴𝐸. What is the matter? North asked after a few seconds of tense silence between us. I was just flicking the various strawberries and grapes around my bowl as he picked at the toast on his. My gaze slanted towards him, towards his large, tin hands pulling apart the bread and the muscle straining in his arms. He looked better than the night before, was acting better. Perhaps a good night's sleep was really what he needed. Why do you not tell me anything? I asked softly after quiet consideration, the words slipping from my mouth on a rather depressed air. He tensed beside me for a moment, his fingers still in it tearing apart his toast before his large body leaned slowly towards mine. What is the anything you are referring to? Anything. Eric. Everything. What happened with 𝐊𝐢𝐳? Why was he so upset about me being here? What is going on with Liberius and why aren't you handling the situation? Immerse, he said on a sigh, his blue eyes closing in patience as I turned to face him. But I was done. And why did you lie to me about Immerse? His eyes snapped open the minute that name passed my lips, and his jaw clenched as his gaze flickered to mine. But I didn't waver. Not now. He wanted us to grow closer, like we should have been from the beginning. But if that were to happen, he needed to tell me the things he was so set on keeping a secret. He still paused, the bright blue of his gaze searching for some look in mine. Then he glanced away. I did not lie. That name belongs to the Star Adranus fell in love with. The one you told me about. And you said you didn't remember its name, because names have power, especially old ones. The true name of a star, especially the one who owns a god's heart, is not one to speak of lightly. There was a hard bite to his tone, one that made me lean away from him. A flicker of anger and slight pain shot through me. There was no reason for him to sound harsh. That was all you had to say. I pushed my untouched bowl of fruit away and stood to my feet. We were both getting a little aggravated. And if I learned anything from living with May and her brother, it was to never discuss anything when you were mad. It only turned into an argument both sides would regret later. Immerse. Wait. His large, warm, calloused hand was suddenly wrapping around my wrist as I turned from the table, his touch gentle as he tried to ease back towards him. I wasn't entirely sure that I wanted to. Do not be upset over this. Adranus and his star are just a story, regardless of the power in their names. I gritted my teeth before turning back to him, but his blue eyes drew me in like always. I stood awkwardly at the side of his chair, mine resting just a few inches away. Liberius believes it to be more than a story. His gaze flashed and his grip on my wrist tightened as his large, muscled body tensed beside me. And when did he tell you this? I could sense the cold, steely anger underlying his tone. It was quiet, but there, and it made my stomach flutter, but it wasn't in a completely unpleasant way either. I felt he tries to my cheeks in embarrassment. I knew he didn't want me anywhere near the seer after our run, and on the staircase, and I honestly had no genuine reason for speaking to him besides curiosity. I understood why he was mad. This morning, in the library, he said he wanted to speak to me about the story, that he could answer the questions you never seemed to want to. But all he told me was that I am some reincarnation of 𝐴dranus' star. I scoffed and rolled my eyes. I should have known better than to believe anything that mad promised. I watched as his jaw clenched taut, as his hand around my wrist tightened until it almost hurt, and then he glanced away. He is a ridiculous being. Do not believe a word he says. Immerse. He only wishes to irritate me. His words made me frown, but I didn't say anything as he let go of my wrist and stood to his feet. So you don't believe him? I asked softly as he walked towards the large window at the side of the room. He leaned against the wall beside it, his thick arms crossing over his strong chest as he gazed out at the snow littering the ground. I believe many things, believe in many things. The seer has held his position so long for being successfully able to read the spirits on the other side, but speaking to you out of term and purposefully when I was not around is not acceptable. He wanted me to help find him, to find Adranus. His blue eyes snapped over to mine, the electric light and them flashing against the darkness of the room. Did he say why? He wants his power, Eric. He wants to control him. He murmured almost thoughtfully before glancing back out the window. He is growing arrogant, tricking you into speaking with him. That is far from acceptable. Should we be worried about what he plans? My little Immerse, if Adranus is truly out there, I will deal with it. The seer will not get to him or you again for that matter. He paused and licked his lips, the muscles in his arms straining as he leaned against the wall. It is time I dealt with him. Permanently. Chapter 25. 𝐿𝐢𝐬𝐪 chuckled, but the look in his eyes was rather unsettling. What a ridiculous notion. Perhaps that power he constantly babbles on about finally fried his brain, but I was convinced. For the first time since I arrived in North's palace, his second-in-command wouldn't meet my eyes. You believe him? Of course I don't. People can't be stars. You're 𝐿𝐢𝐬. I narrowed my eyes, a guilty look that flashed through his. He did believe the seer, regardless of how insane the thought was. He just didn't want to admit it. But eventually he let out a sigh. It's not that simple. The seer might be a nuisance to the kingdom, but he still communicates with the spirit realm. I would not believe anything he says. My lady, but that doesn't mean some of it isn't true. The king wants me to forget that I was ever in the library. I murmured more to myself than him once he settled back in his seat, the guilty expression swarming his eyes gone. Perhaps that would be for the best. I rolled my eyes at that statement and let out a tired sigh before closing the book resting in front of me. I am getting rather sick of everyone saying that. His dark eyes slanted towards mine before he reached up and ran his strong fingers through his sand-colored hair. Yes, I imagine you are. But believe me, Immerse. I knew what he was going to say was true based simply on the fact that he didn't put the lady in front of my name. I would tell you everything in a heartbeat if it were that easy. And why isn't it? The king has his reasons. I scoffed at that answer. What a ridiculous one it was. It was pretty much the same response from her if every time I asked him. Mars didn't want me then. So his generals wouldn't bother telling me. Do you even know what those reasons are? He chuckled once again, and his brown eyes seemed to dance in amusement as he played with an absent pawn from the chessboard always ready at the table. More than I would like, but they are important, and I agree with them enough to not disobey him. Of course you do. I grumbled and leaned back in my chair with an exasperated sigh. I honestly didn't even know why I bothered asking anymore. 𝐿𝐢𝐬𝐪 unrolled his eyes. Listen, my lady. North does Immerse. His words were suddenly cut off from the almost vicious growl tearing through his own chest. There was a flash of blue, a bright blue so electric that I knew it could belong to no one other than the king, and then the second-in-command was gripping impossibly tight onto my wrist, my eyes wide and in alarm. 𝐿𝐢𝐬𝐪 on. What are you doing, Immerse? He growled again, his brown eyes completely hidden behind the bright blue of Eric's glaring down at me in such anger that it made my stomach flip. The grip the large general had on my wrist only tightened, and I gasped at the sharp stab of pain it shot through my arm. North. My voice was a surprised whisper as the 𝐿𝐢𝐬𝐪 on continued to growl and stand to his feet, pulling me with him. What's going on? There was another flash of blue, and the general snarled before reaching up with his free hand to press firmly against the side of his head, his eyes closing in pain. North. He growled deep in his throat, his voice sounding much more like his own, although his grip on my wrist only hardened. 𝐿𝐢𝐬𝐪 on let go. "You're hurting me." But he didn't let go. He didn't seem to hear me at all. The general was hunched over at the waist, his large palm pressing into the side of his head as his eyes shut tight against some unseen pain. The hand around my thin wrist only seemed to tense with each passing second. The large wolf-born growled, and his body began to shake as I tried to desperately pull my wrist from his grasp. His eyes suddenly shot open, but they were no longer the blue of the king's or even his normal brown. They were black. The black of a furious wolf. A wolf he appeared to have trouble controlling. A vicious snarl tore from his lips, his gums pulling back to reveal sharp, pointed canines. My eyes widened in panic. I've only ever seen North and Turf shift before, and neither of them made it seem as painful as 𝐿𝐻𝐼𝐻 was. He acted as if he were forcing the change to stop, but was failing miserably. I tried to take a step back as a horrible growl tore from his still human lips, but his grip would not loosen. There was a moment of silence, a painful, dead silence, before the man in front of me slowly started to become less and less human. There was a horrible pain shooting up my arm, and then a sound of loud crack echoing around the room. I screamed as a white, hot agony enveloped my wrist and hand, the horrible slivers of pain zapping up the rest of my arm. And yet, he would still not let go. 𝐿𝐻𝐼𝐻, please. I honestly thought he was going to change half, way and straight up eat me, like I thought the kind would have done all those months before, until another howl sounded around the large sitting room. I glanced up just in time to see the familiar dark brown fur of Tariff's wolf running full speed at us. 𝐿𝐻𝐼𝐻's talon, like fingers, let go of my skin right before the other wolf collided with his transitioning body. I stumbled backwards in a hurried, frenzied manner, my no-doubted shattered wrist clutched protectively to my chest as I pressed my back against the nearest wall. 𝐿𝐻𝐼𝐻 finally finished shifting, and I stood in shock, pressed against a wall watching a wolf the color of sun snap and viciously bite at Tariff. What in the actual fuck was going on? Immerse. His voice sounded in my ear over the loud snarls of the two fighting wolves, before I even saw him. A flash of wind swept past me before I was gazing up with wide and slightly horrified eyes at the king. Immerse, he started again, his hand reaching out for me, but I flinched away. Hurt flashed across his bright gaze. "You caused this." "I know you did," I heard myself saying, even though I washed fully aware of what my body was doing at that moment. My mind was too busy reeling over how animalistic 𝐿𝐻𝐼𝐻 had suddenly become, and how he snapped my wrist like it was a twig. "I did not mean to." He spoke softly, his eyes flashing with so many different emotions that I couldn't pinpoint just one. I glanced away from him and around his large shoulder just in time to see 𝐿𝐻𝐼𝐻's huge wolf being pinned to the ground by Tariff. My breathing came out as a shuddering breath. "Immerse, I am truly sorry. I didn't mean. My wrist. It's broken." I heard my voice mumble again, my eyes flickering back and forth between the kings and the two wolves at the opposite end of the room. "I can fix it." He was reaching slowly out for me again, but like last time I jerked uneasily away. A pained frown pulled at his lips. "What did you? How did you?" I couldn't think straight, and I could barely make any coherent sentences, but he seemed to understand me anyway. "I can enter any of my people's minds, for a brief period of time, and control them if I wish." His voice was hesitant. His eyes narrowed slightly in concern as he watched me like a parent would a newborn infant. "You broke my wrist." No, I would never." He was shaking his head in absolute denial, his eyes horrified at the simple notion, but I wasn't necessarily convinced. He even said he was in control for a moment. I learned something about the seer, something that pissed me off enough that I couldn't think straight. "But I had to check on you. I had to make sure you were okay." I was mad when I entered 𝐿𝐻𝐼𝐻's mind. Too mad to ask permission, and I ended up fucking up his conscience. His reaction was his wolf's instinctive response. Defense. Neither one of us meant to hurt you. I believed him. It was only because of the sad, regretful, and guilty look that suddenly swamped his beautiful blue eyes. I knew he would never purposefully hurt me. I knew none of them would. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But that still didn't ease my slightly fear. What did you find out about the seer? The wolves, still slightly squabbling behind him, were slowly starting to calm down. Turf seemed like he was only trying to stop 𝐿𝐢𝐬𝐬's wolf from hurting himself. Or us, for that matter. As the lighter wolf went crazy. Honestly, I didn't blame him. I would probably freak out too if someone had suddenly infiltrated my mind without warning. North hesitated, his tongue flicking out to lick his full lips as his eyes glanced away. My jaw clenched at the sight, and I cradled my throbbing wrist tighter against my chest. Just another freaking secret he was going to share. But then his eyes were hardening and snapping back to mine before I had time to process it. His large body leaned down closer. So close I had to press my back against the wall so our noses wouldn't touch. He was inside your head. He had put thoughts into your mind. Immerse. The other day when you met him in the library, you were never going to leave my room if it weren't for him. I cowled and stopped the gas that tore from my lips as his blue eyes flashed in anger. Liberius had been inside, putting thoughts there. But how? My head, along with my wrist, was beginning to throb. For the first time in a long time, I just wanted to lay in bed and cry, both from the pain and the knowledge that my mind had literally been invaded. I had no idea how his generals could stand North popping in and out of their heads whenever he pleased. Then again, I was no wolf born. I will kill him. Literally Immerse. I will rip him apart limb by limb and feed them to those souls he seemed so desperately attached to. There was no threat in his tone. Only a stark promise, and it made my head pound even more. My eyes widened as my arms ached with pain again, and I pressed it harder to my chest like that would ease the discomfort. His eyes flickered down to my hand at the action. The hard, icy blue softening as he leaned a little way away from me. Let me heal you. It was a question, or a statement either really, but more like a request that he planned on fulfilling if it took his last dying breath. The chaos behind him had died completely down, but Turf was still standing protectively between us and 𝐿𝐢𝐬𝐬's sand-colored wolf began to slowly shift back. I brought my gaze back to Eric before giving him a small nod. I've seen him appear only as an apparition, seen him make small tornadoes in his palm, and now infiltrate someone's mind. I had no doubt he would be able to heal anything if he wanted. His shoulders eased slightly when he reached for me once again. And this time I actually let him. I should kill him for hurting you, he murmured as both of his large hands came up to gently cut my wrist. I watched with wide eyes as he began to slowly raise my hand to his lips, but I know it was not his fault. It was mine. I stared in awe at his blue eyes as they locked with mine, his large hands holding my wrist as his warm lips pressed against the underside of the quickly bruising bone in a gentle kiss. His eyes flashed and then the pain was fading easily away, the black and blue of the skin disappearing. Well, all better, he murmured against my skin, but did not lower my hand. His lips brushed against the underside of my wrist once again, his blue eyes glowing softly against the black of his short hair. He truly was beautiful. Immerse. I'm so sorry. And just like that, our little moment was severed. The king growled, his eyes darkening as his head snapped to the side. Forgive me, North. I could not control it. I wasn't expecting for you, I know. He snapped as his hand gently lowered mine once again. I flexed my fingers and rolled the healed bone. It didn't hurt at all. It was like it had never been broken to begin with. It is not a mistake I will be making again. 𝐿𝐢𝐬's brown eyes locked with mine. And despite the desperate plea in them, I couldn't bring myself to hold his gaze for too long. And it had everything to do with the fact that he was 100% without clothes in front of us, and he didn't seem to care. I could feel the red, hot heat travel up the back of my neck and into my cheeks at the sight. Even though the king placed himself directly in front of me, I forgot how little the wolf-borns cared about their nudity after shifting. Go put some fucking clothes on, North snarled, his large back staying directly in front of me in some attempt to block the very without clothes male from my view. Why, I think my lady is enjoying the view. I squeaked in the growl that tore from 𝐿𝐼𝐻's chest was so vicious it made my stomach flip. 𝐿𝐼𝐬𝐬 suddenly laughed, and the sound seemed to fix all the mess that had just ensued. I'm joking, just joking. Get the fuck out now, North snarled, and 𝐿𝐼𝐬𝐬 gave us all one last chuckle before leaving. Well, sauntering out of the room without a care. My cheeks were still stained a blood red. Go shift elsewhere. 𝐊𝐼𝐬𝐬. There was still a hard bite to North's tone, but his shoulders visibly eased once his second-in-command had left. There was a very animal snort, and I peeked around his large arm just enough to see 𝐊𝐼𝐬𝐬 give the king an eye roll before walking casually out of the room, like he hadn't just been in a fight with another wolf. The king eased completely once his delta had left, his shoulders dropping as his large hand reached up to 𝐊𝐼𝐬𝐬's his dark hair. The patience I have with those two is beyond bounds. He grumbled before turning back towards me, his blue eyes flashing in the darkening room. Patience? I asked with quiet disbelief. He seemed angrier and more fed up with them than anything else. His full lips quirked up at the corner, and his blue eyes flashed. The rather sly look sent butterflies raging throughout my stomach. I felt a blush heat my cheeks for a completely different reason. Yes, patience. There are very few people who I would allow you so casually like this, much less let them walk away from revealing themselves to you. I couldn't hold his gaze any longer. The embarrassed heat on my face and neck wouldn't let me. It will be dark soon. I'm sure you are tired. I will escort you back to your room. He changed the subject. Thankfully, before reaching for my no longer injured hand, I let him take it without a fuss. I promise that I will not be so foolish in my anger again. His deep voice was a soft murmur, his blue eyes gentle as they gazed warmly down at me. I gave him a small smile. What do you plan on doing with Liberius? I asked softly a moment later as he led me slowly down the hall. His large body stiffened beside me, before he let out a deep breath of air. Isn't it obvious? His voice was dark, the tone in it hostile as we pulled to a stop outside my door. I raised an eyebrow at him, obviously not if I'm asking. His eyes wide and at that before narrowing with a rather sickening gleam dancing across his gaze. I'm going to kill him. 𝐿𝐼𝐬𝐬's soft knock disrupted my unrestful sleep. I had been in and out of a dream, like stay all night, never able to actual drift off. In all honesty, I hadn't had a decent night's rest since the time I slept beside the king, 3 days ago. I let out a quiet groan and rolled slowly off the bed, my cold toes wiggling into the soft slippers at my bedside. The moon was high in the sky, and it appeared to have been for a while. Who could possibly want to talk to me in the middle of the night? I walked sluggishly to the door, my head throbbing painfully behind my skull. The less I slept, the worse the headache. Bright blue eyes were glowing down at me from the dark hallway the minute I opened the door. I blinked up at them before rubbing tiredly at my own. North? I asked with a drained yawn as he leaned casually against my open door frame, his large arms crossed over his hard chest. What are you doing here? I cowled in sleep. His deep voice rolled easily off his tongue, a voice I would never grow tired of hearing. I'm sorry to wake you. He gave me a soft smile, and that one small action caused my stomach to flutter in nervous butterflies. You didn't. I didn't really sleep either. His small smile pulled into a frown, and his sleek black shirt trickled as he uncrossed his arms and leaned away from the door. Immerse. I didn't stop the startled sound from leaving my lips as my tired eyes snapped open in surprise. What did he just ask? A smirk pulled at his beautifully taunting lips, and his blue eyes flashed in amusement as he leaned over me, a small chuckle emitting from his chest. Not like that, my lady. Unless you would like to. His eyes flashed in quiet mirth, a look that seemed to only grow as red stained my cheeks brightly for the second time that day. I couldn't even think straight, much less speak. The embarrassment was way too much. His dark chuckle pulled at my erratically beating heart. Sleep beside me, like the other night. I think it would help us both. His smile eased to that gentle, warm one he seemed to only save for me. But that sly look in his eyes did not fade. He found my embarrassment amusing. I don't think I started softly, my cheeks still hot as I tore my gaze from his. Stay with me, little 𝐸. I do not think I will be able to sleep if you don't. I still hesitated, a frown pulling at my lips as his eyes stared holes down into my hidden gaze. At that moment, I wanted nothing more than to sleep beside him, but it wasn't proper, even for mates. Sleeping in the same bed while unmated was highly inappropriate. But perhaps, maybe it was different in his culture. I hadn't noticed him leaning closer towards me, his large arm winding slowly along my waist until his warm lips were brushing softly against my cheek. My eyes widened at the sparks that shot through my body at the simple touch. I want you to stay with me, he murmured into my ear, his breath hot as it fanned the expanse of my neck. Please. My breathing quickened in my chest, and my mind went to a complete puddle of goo. There was no thinking clearly with him this close, with him touching me the way he was. My eager head was nodding before I even realized it. He pulled back with a satisfied, but his arm around my waist only tightened. 𝐸 is rather adorable. He tonally returned to my cheeks at the statement, but I kept my mouth shut as he eased me slowly from my room, like he was afraid I would back out if he went too fast. I yawned as he closed the door behind us. His bright eyes were the only light in the entire hall. It was rather beautiful, in a creepy and eerie kind of way. It had to have been the magic inside of him that allowed them to glow like that. Or his wolf, but I was leaning more towards the former. A whole new wave of sleep washed over me the second we entered his room, and I was crawling into his bed on my own accord without bothering to wait for him. His quiet chuckle was like music to my exhausted ears. Eager little thing. I heard his dark voice murmur as I crawled under the thick covers and pulled them to my chin. It was a rather chilly night. I was so tired, but still unable to fall asleep as he paused at the bedside. I frowned and squished further down in the comfortable mattress. I wasn't sure if it was because he was the king or because it was simply his. But the bed was 10 times more comfortable than my own, and it smelled like him too. I jumped slightly when the bed suddenly dipped deeply by my side, but his large, soft hand was easing gently over my blanket, covered arm before I freaked out too much. His deep sigh filled my ears. "You're so small," he grumbled as his large body slipped beneath the covers. I was to try to respond, but my lips pulled into a frown anyway. I was not small. Bare skin brushed against my arm beneath the blankets, and I let out a soft sigh as his warm touch curled gently around me. A soft heat enveloped my chilled body, but it became so warm I actually edged the covers off of me a bit. Bare skin touched my fingertips, and I froze. He had taken his shirt off before lying down, and the hard muscles of his chest and stomach were just within reach, but I was too tired to act on my disastrous thoughts. He breathed heavily against my ear. "Get some sleep, my little star." Chapter 26. Soft rays of morning light were beaming across my closed eyes. I didn't want to wake up. I just wanted to snuggle closer to the warmth radiating against my side. Gentle fingertips reached up and smoothed the fallen pieces of hair away from my face. "I know you're awake." No, I wasn't. I was still sleeping, still enjoying the quiet emptiness of the dream world before I had to enter the crazy, chaotic, and mind-boggling reality. I made a nod. It was so nice, such a reprieve from the cold darkness of my room. A dark chuckle washed slowly over me, and those soft fingertips traced teasingly down my arm. He didn't say anything else, but I knew he was patiently waiting for my mind to clear of its grogginess. I blinked tiredly up at the large warmth hovering beside me. My lips parted in a yawn. "I'm sleepy," I murmured before closing my eyes again and pressing myself against his warm chest. He let out another low laugh, but his large hand was reaching up and rubbing gently over my hair anyway. It had been the first night I had slept completely through, besides the time I slept beside him, in as long as I could remember. I didn't want it to end, although I knew if my mind was so fuzzy I wouldn't be pressing against him like I was. I would hold you against me like this for an eternity if I could. But there are things I must do today. He murmured against the top of my hair, his calloused hand soft as it rubbed gently over my back. My eyes blinked open again, my heart quickening in my chest. I was practically clinging to the king in my sleeping estate. My fingers curled into fists against his strong chest. My eyes focused. The grog in us left my brain. And then I jerked away from him with a horrified, burning blush rising to my cheeks. I am so sorry. I squeaked and tried to pull completely away from him, but his large hand snapped out and caught my upper arm before I could get very far. I gaped up at him. At the bright blue eyes narrowed in a disgruntled manner. My blush didn't tease. Do not be sorry for clinging to me. Immerse. I am your mate. You are allowed to. His tone was hard, his voice low. Even though it only made more, he tries to my neck. I stammered as he pulled me slowly back into him. His large, hard arms wrapping around me like a thick muscled blanket. So much for those things he needed to do. His tone eased as his warm lips rubbed gently along my forehead. The soft, surprising touch made my eyes widen. HES never really been this touchy before. Such a shy little thing you are. He teased softly against my skin, his strong fingers winding gently into my messy hair. I remained quiet. I was too busy trying to keep my breathing calm. He was so close and smelled so good. Like the snow after it had just freshly fallen. It made my head spin. You are so different from the females of my kind. He started quietly, his breath hot as it tickled my skin. They are used to the brutish mannerisms and behaviors of the males. Sometimes I forget that I have to be far more gentle with you. His tone was soft as his strong fingers rubbed gently at my hair, his other arm holding me strongly to him. Mates are the most important aspect to my people. He continued lowly, his voice almost sad as it filled the quiet room. Our God gave up a piece of his own soul to bring them into existence. To disregard one's other half is the highest form of betrayal to what we are. Why are you telling me this? North. I mumbled against his bare chest. My hand pressed flatly against its hard ridges and lines. He let out a heavy sigh, the fingers in my hair tightened. I want to lie and say it's to make you feel better. To make up for avoiding you for months. But, in reality, it's to make myself feel better. I pulled slowly away from him, a frown tugging at my lips. His blue eyes were gazing down at me in such a sad concentration that it tore at my heart. What do you mean? I told you before that it is not normal for my kind to be parted once they found their mate, that it has never actually been done. And yet, I forced us apart for months. It was to protect you, but still, I was betraying every instinct in me, everything holy law inside of me. I won't say I regret the decision, but I hate myself for making it. A dark lock of his hair had fallen across his forehead, and my hand was reaching up to brush it away before I could tell myself not to. His blue eyes stayed locked on my gaze the entire time. I know that you felt that way, I just don't really know why. You hardly ever tell me anything. My voice was practically a whisper. Despite the silence in the room, my brow creasing at the frown that flashed across his. His seemed to be a light, like the sun rays from the window falling over the carpeted floor. I know, and for that I am sorry, but you must understand that I do everything for a reason, and hardly regret my actions. I do not tell you things, because it is not yet time for you to know. My frown grew into a scowl at his words, and it was all I could do not to visibly struck his bulging arm. It looked like a perfect target. That does not mean that I enjoy it. Immerse. I hate seeing the saddened look in your eyes, especially when you realize there are only more secrets being kept from you. I didn't like the sorrowful look that crossed his handsome face, but his words pulled me into completely opposite ways. I wanted to be mad at him, to demand he tell me what was actually going on and what all those secrets were, while the other part, the one desperately tied to him, wanted me to respect his decision, to have faith that he would tell me everything when he'd the time to be right. I let out a heavy sigh and allowed my fingers to just barely trace his sharp jaw. Do not let that time be too long. I muttered even though I knew there was no replacing that hardened look in his eyes. He was so set in his own mind, set that it was practically impossible to persuade him against something he believed in. Sadly, I admired that. He didn't say anything else, just sort of held my gaze in that solid, unwavering stare that we so often shared. There was silence for a few long, pleasant minutes, before he finally glanced away, a small sigh leaving his lips. It is growing closer to midday, and there truly are matters I must attend to. His voice was a dark mutter as his blue eyes watched the sun through the glass window. I tried to keep the unpleasant scowl from my face as he flipped over the bed's covers and stood to his feet. North and I never got to talk like this. Never got to be like this. He was always so closed off and stony. This was an abnormal moment that I wasn't ready to end, despite the turmoil my thoughts were in. 𝐖𝐨𝐬𝐬𝐻 wishes to take you into town again, to make up for yesterday, he announced casually as he began walking towards the small, wooden door at the back of the room. I couldn't stop my gaze from following the hard planes and muscles of his back as he moved. He was just so yummy. The thought actually made me want to blush. There was honestly no other word to describe him in such a simple manner. The sight of him shirtless made my mouth water. When did you talk to him? He stopped just outside of the door and shot me a smile, his tan fingers reaching up to press against his temple. Oh, remembering his whole mind trick thing would take some getting used to. I am going to have a servant draw me a bath. Would you like one as well? His question was innocent enough, but just hearing the words bath in him in the same sentence made he tries to my cheeks. No. Thank you. I will have one later. He shot me a smile, either oblivious to the red staining my face, or didn't care. I was honestly happy with either option. Very well. I will see you this afternoon. Immerse. See you. I waved awkwardly after him, my other hand clenching nervously at the bedspread as he disappeared behind the door. Now what? I do not know how you sit with all the junk you inhale. I commented as 𝐖𝐨𝐬𝐬𝐻 stuffed his face with yet another mini cake. He shot me a wide, desert-filled smile. I cringed. I have a vigorous training regime. Don't you worry, my lady. Then he paused, ate another caramelized candy before winking at me. And wolf-borns have a metabolism that puts the triathlon runners to shame. That was definitely more believable. I was with the general almost every hour of the day, and I have not once seen him in any sort of exercising form. He was either bragging about beating me in chess, or stuffing his face. The male was beyond obsessed with food. I cowed and helped the small laugh that pulled from my lips, and began to roll my eyes as he started to bicker with the stand's owner over a price for a bag of sweet taffy, like candy, when a dark flash of green caught my eyes. My brows furrowed curiously. That looked like May's cloak. Then I saw her, just out of the corner of my gaze, the familiar color of her winter cloak disappearing around a bustling stand. I frowned. What in the world was May doing up here? I turned away from the squabbling 𝐖𝐴𝐻 and storekeeper, a flash of large, frightening, hazel eyes drawing my attention. They, I called out to the distant figure, but only received a few odd glances from the wolf-borns around me. I ignored them and hurried after the brief image of my friend, May. I called again once I rounded the corner. I saw she had disappeared behind. My steps faltered and I frowned. There was no one there, just an empty alley. I sighed and shook my head. Being around all the craziness at the castle was really starting to get to me. I squealed when a thin, tight grip suddenly wrapped around my wrist. I whirled around, ready to slap the culprit silly, when my eyes landed on a rather horrid-looking May. Dark blue circles outlined her sunken eyes, her cheeks pale and skin clammy as if she hadn't seen the sun in weeks. And she was thin, skinner than I had ever seen her before in our entire life. My breathing hitched in my throat. Dear Lord, May, what happened to you? I tried to keep my voice soft and gentle as the beyond frightened girl grasped desperately at my wrist. Immerse. She wheezed, her breathing hard as her balance staggered. They lied to you, the elders. We all did. I didn't know until we returned from the lower kingdom. But I've been lying to you two. She spoke hastily as she shot nervous glances behind her shoulder, like she was afraid someone was after her. What are you talking about? My eyebrows were crunched together in confusion, my hands gripping tightly onto her thin arms as she flinched uneasily in front of me every couple of seconds. I shook my head. You're not making any sense. There's something you need to see. She spoke over me like I hadn't even bothered to open my mouth. Her dark, hazel eyes almost hollow as she let go of my wrist. My stomach twisted uneasily. I don't understand what is going on. What do you mean you have all been lying to me? She didn't let me finish, and before I could realize what she was doing, her small fingers were pressing harshly into my temples. I jerked against her hold, my eyes wide at the odd action, until the world around me disappeared, and was replaced by the one inside of my best friend's head. I gasped. Craters as wide as the king's castle littered the ground. Thousands of them, all dark, deep holes in the lower grounds of the world. People laid inside of them, one person for each crater for hundreds, and hundreds of leagues. Then May's mind flashed elsewhere to cave. A murky cave hid and deep within the base of the king's mountain, a mountain that had yet to be inhabited by anything besides its animals. A box rested at the end of the long tunnel, like cavern, a glass box where no light seemed to escape or enter. How long ago was this? My mind asked no one in particular as May stepped closer to the coffin, like glass box. This cave was a tomb buried deep within the mountain, long before any shifter or human walked the expanse of the north. I wasn't expecting her voice to answer, much less respond in my mind. The feeling was odd. I had never before shared my subconscious with anyone that I was aware of at least. Why are you showing me this? How are you doing this? You have to see. You have to know, she repeated solemnly, both sad and distant, but persistent. This was not the May I knew. What had happened to her? She drew my mind's eye closer to the glass coffin, closer than I would have ever liked. I didn't want to be anywhere near it, anywhere near the cave in this part of the mountain. I didn't want to believe any of it. Didn't want to believe there was cavern, like tombs buried deep at the base of the mountain, or that May looked as if she were on her deathbed and ability to enter people's mind at will. It was all becoming too surreal, too unfamiliar. Still, she drew me closer to the coffin, closer to whomever was lying dead inside. Why did I have to see this? Why was it so important to her? Torches suddenly flickered to life around the small room that had been carved into the cavern, and the glass of the box reflected its orange light, and the person lying inside. No, I heard myself both say out loud and in my mind. I tried to take a step away from her, my eyes wide in surprise, but her grip only tightened and she held me firmly in place. 𝐸, no. I gasped and jerked against her grip, my mind trying to desperately push against hers. It's not true. You're lying. This is a trick. No, it's not. May blinked and then we were suddenly standing in the abandoned alley once again, her sick appearance only worsening as I tried to wrench myself away from her. It has to be. That's impossible. I didn't realize there were tears streaming down my cheeks until the water was dripping off my chin. It's true. 𝐸. You have to believe me. She was crying as well, but her tears seemed to be more out of fear than anything else. 𝐸. I heard 𝐊𝐢𝐬 call for me just a few yards away from the tunnel, a certain degree of worry lining his tone. I was more than happy to hear his voice. I wanted to feel horrid for wishing to be rid of her, but this was all too insane. 𝐸. Please. You must know. They found you first when you fell, the elders of old. They knew who you were, who you are. They spelled and trapped you in that coffin to keep you from him. It's always been about power. 𝐸. There you are. It was 𝐊𝐢𝐬 who interrupted her, but the strong, powerful voice of the king sounding behind me. My heart hammered in my throat as I stepped hurriedly away from the deranged May, her hazel eyes wide and in horror at the large mill suddenly behind me, the pupils of them changing drastically between her animals and hers. My own gaze widened in surprise at the male suddenly behind her, the one who looked rather murderous. "Seize the underling. 𝐴𝐴𝑦𝐴𝑟'𝐬. No, don't hurt her," I cried at the large wolf born, and tried to hurry in front of her like a protective wall. But North's thick arm was circling around my waist and pinning my back against his thick chest before I had the chance. "No, please. She's my friend. Deranged or not, I still loved her like family. Even if she thought I had been stuck in a box for hundreds of years, thinking I was some reincarnation of a star was one thing. But believing I had been spelled asleep in some coffin, no, that was beyond impossible." 𝐴𝐴𝑦𝐿 paused behind her, his large hands gripping tightly onto her thin upper arms. His brown eyes flickered between mine and the kings in question, but it was May who made the decision. My breathing hitched in surprise at the small smile she gave me. "No, it's all right. I would rather be in prison and die here than suffer any more from them." I didn't have to guess who the them was. The elders. She was terrified of them. They had done this to her. I could tell from her eyes. But why? Why would they hurt her so? Eric was quiet behind me, his chest hard as it pressed against my back, his arms tight and around my waist as he pulled me closer to him. "To whom are you referring?" he finally growled, his voice gruff as it filled the tense air surrounding the alley. "The elders of our town." May seemed scared, but nothing as bad as the first time we trespassed his territory. It was like she no longer really cared what happened to her. That thought tugged at my chest. "They were upset that lay, and I let her go to you. They feared your connection to him, so they punished us." My head was beginning to throb. None of this was making any sense. The elders were mad that I was with the king now. Why? Because they 𝐊𝐤didn't study my power anymore, and they hurt May because of it. This was ridiculous. Then again, if she truly thought their ancestors had locked me in a box for hundreds of years, I understood why she would fear them, especially if that had punished her for some ridiculous reason. But even that seemed so out of reality. And yet, the king still stiff and behind me, as if some part of him actually believed her. "Tell me, feline, why risk your life by coming here to speak to my mate?" May eyes flickered between mine and the king's, her sunken-in cheeks appearing more hollow than ever before. Immerse needs to know the truth. She has a right to. This seems far from the blasted truth. I started to snap, but the king interrupted me before I could finish. 𝐴𝐴𝑦𝐿. Take the underling to the infirmary. I want her as healed as possible for further questioning. Questioning. I gaped at the word, and tried to turn to glare up at him. But his tight grip on my waist wouldn't let me. "Yes, my lord." 𝐴𝐴𝑦𝐿 nodded, and with one last wink my way, he and May were gone. I was left staring at their empty spaces. I blinked, and then felt anger boil in my stomach. "What is going on? North? And don't you dare lie to me." I tried to keep my voice as firm as possible, but he was caressing my hip gently and forcing my mind to spiral, easing the anger ever slowly away. "I am just as clueless as you. I said don't lie." He hunched slightly over me, until his large body was practically cradling my smaller one to his chest. "I was very worried about you. You know, when 𝐴𝐼𝐿 told me you had suddenly disappeared," he murmured into my ear, and despite the nerve shooting through me at his close proximity, I tried to keep my resolve steely. He sighed into my ear. "It would appear that these elder of yours had been lying to you more than I ever have. She thinks I was trapped in a box beneath the mountain long before anyone ever lived here." I grumbled as he practically squished me to his chest. He had been acting so odd lately, so much more intimate. Part of me wanted to relish in it, to hold on to him as tightly as I could. The other part, the saner part, didn't know what to make of a sudden change. He tensed behind me once again, his head bowing until his lips were just a fraction away from the skin of my throat. Asleep for hundreds of years, right beneath the nose. His voice was almost a harsh growl against my skin, his breath hot as it fanned my neck. The feeling sent a surge of nerves flutters throughout my entire being. "Why, you believe her," I stammered as his lips barely brushed against the skin of my neck. The touch sent electricity through my entire body. I am not sure, but I do believe it is time I made a personal visit to this village of yours.